What about evil? Um, there's an interesting concept about that. One of the most fascinating aspects of evil to me isn't necessarily the evil itself, but more so the ignoring of it by most religions and most faiths and most spiritual teachings and stuff like that. In the New Age, or the spiritual non-duality, and if you do the research, I mean really seriously research, irregardless of what the gurus say and what they teach, if you stick around long enough and you really try to discover what it is that lies at the core of what they're teaching, I think you'll find, I would say 95% of all of them teach non-duality. I mean, they can call it any number of things they want, but it all boils down to non-duality. And then when you define what non-duality is, I mean, it's really quite simple to understand if you spent any time with it, and that is, there's only God. And so you are God. Just like my finger here is, if I was identifying myself as a human body, this finger is me, and I can make it move or whatever. But the bottom line is, the encompassing totality of what I am can be broken down into many smaller parts, but they're all still me. And that's exactly the way non-duality views reality, in that you are God. And consequently, you really can't sin against yourself because you're God. And so there really is no such thing as evil, and there really is no such thing as good or evil, because it's all seen as one thing. And just because a finger is a finger doesn't mean it's not me. And that's the way they view it. There are numerous people that are ignorant of this fact, and then they would like to argue that no, in fact, there is evil and everything else. But these people are ignorant of what they are trying to understand. And when they do finally understand it, they will know that what I'm saying is true. All of them teach that. I mean, like, there's damn near none that don't teach that. Even the ones that are super leaning towards the original concept of the ancient teachings in Hinduism type thing, even those will eventually boil it down to non-duality. And the funny thing is, Christianity is very similar too. It's just that, for the most part, Christianity breeds ignorance, and in so doing, they refuse to dig deeper, rather than they just accept Jesus as their Savior and let the chips fall where they may. They're not going to bother researching any further. But if they did, they would come to the same conclusion, and that is, everything is non-duality. I mean, even when Jesus says, I and the Father are one, and then he also goes on to say, I am your example, you should strive to be like me, which would basically say that what he's saying to do is awaken yourself and quit being so ignorant. It's not like you're not like him. The fact remains that you're ignorant and you don't realize you're like him, and that's what he's saying. But people don't understand this. And so cognitive dissonance is a good example of Christianity, and all forms of Christianity also, because they refuse to dig deeper into what the so-called official teachings are. And so they just don't go any further. I'm not dissing the so-called teachings of Jesus about love. His philosophy, if he even existed, is off the charts fantastic. It doesn't matter. The question of whether or not Jesus even existed doesn't even matter, because it's the philosophy and it's the teaching that matters. Because you could take that a step further and say, well, if it matters that I believe in Jesus, then he should appear to me in the physical sense, just like he did to people 2,000 years ago. And if he's not willing to do that, why should I believe in him? To say you got to have faith, well, okay, there's plenty of people with faith, and yet none see Jesus. They might feel his presence or this or that or whatever, but none see. So, and those that do are delusional. Or if they do, there's no way to pass that on to somebody else. So really, what's the point? And again, I'm not disrespecting the teachings of Jesus. I'm just saying that there's a big hole in the logic and reasoning of people. And no matter what they teach, it always boils down to non-duality. It really does. And that is an evil teaching. I've talked about it before. So, where am I going with this? Well, the concept of evil is so prevalent in this world that it really does require faith to dig yourself out of the trench of what reality is. And again, acknowledging what reality truly is. For instance, in Christianity, they teach all these things and everything, but they fail to recognize that their so-called representative of God, or God himself, was hung on a cross and killed, murdered. And that isn't a very powerful God to worship if he's so dang weak that he's nothing more than a cow or something like that to be butchered. And I know that I sound like I'm speaking blasphemous to Christians and everything like that. But again, I'm not disrespecting any of it. All I'm saying is people refuse to ask the hard questions. And in refusing to ask the hard questions, you're accepting the thousands of years old dogma that has been inserted in there by Lucifer, by Satan, whatever name you want to call this individual. Shiva in Hinduism. It's all been corrupted. And there's no way to get this information other than from the direct source. For instance, you could ask the hard questions. Where did Jesus get all his information? Well, some people say, well, he must have went to India to pick it up. Well, but it was different than Indian teachings. And it still is today different to a large extent. But they make up stories based on zero evidence. So where did he get that information that caused him to be so different than everyone else? Well, they don't like to ask that question because obviously the only way he got that information is what I have been talking about for years, and that is direct vertical to the source of all creation. And of course, it isn't an easy thing to do. In fact, it's one of the most difficult things to do And it has always been one of the most difficult things to do. We live in a reality on a planet that makes no sense. It does to me. I'm not saying I don't understand it. I do. But I'm posing this to the normal-minded person that has not discovered the truth from the Creator, okay? So that's why I'm posing it in a very negative type way. So we live in a realm or a world where it's just hideous beyond belief. I mean, from the very inception of reality, everything is geared toward killing. I mean, we have planets that eventually are eaten up by black holes. We got entire galaxies eaten up by black holes. We got asteroids plowing into things. We got life on this particular planet, and everything eats the lower form, kills it, or like-kinded things. And then we have human beings that, in all forms of life, we got cancer that kills you. And we got everything that imaginable that has always, everything always, is trying to kill and destroy. And what kind of a lunatic God would create a reality like that and expect you to be any different? Now, I know the answers to these, but I again say that I'm posing them in a way that hopefully makes you think. What kind of a God would create a reality like this? I mean, like, seriously, if you understood Lucifer to the level that those that worship Lucifer and actually have had a, if not one-on-one contact with this God, certainly communication on a higher scale to his top lieutenants, so to say. And these people that have had this communication with this Lucifer, they will tell you that he's not that bad. Some say he's the bringer of light. Well, which is knowledge, and that's true. His knowledge. But when you think about it, those that worship Lucifer, they don't ask the hard questions either, because what kind of a lunatic God, again, would create a reality like this? I mean, seriously. If Lucifer really truly is on this planet, for instance, Jesus talks about meeting him one-on-one and in person, and that saying that this individual was a god, and in fact he is the god of this particular world, or realm, or call it whatever you want, but he's the God of this kingdom, and that he's immortal. Therefore, he's still here. He's walking the earth. I mean, he is alive or immortal. But even him, why would he create a reality like this? I mean, this seems to be incredibly stupid to do this. And yet there must be a valid reason for it. However, what's that valid reason? And people don't ask the questions. If you worship Jesus, for instance, why would you worship a guy that teaches about love and in the end couldn't save his little flock any more than he could save himself? Why wouldn't you follow something that's a bit more powerful than that? So we're in this reality. All these questions are open-ended, so to say. Again, I'm saying I understand and know the answers to all these. I'm just not telling you, because it doesn't do any good to tell you. You have to find them out for yourself before they make sense to you. And when they do make sense to you, then that's called a form of enlightenment. One enlightenment is what Buddha experienced. And I doubt a handful of people on the entire planet Earth currently are alive today that have that form of enlightenment with them. But this other form I'm talking about is the enlightenment that Jesus was constantly referring to. And so I'm not giving you the answers to all these things because it doesn't do any good. Because if I did, it wouldn't make any sense to you. But if I pose the questions to you about the lunacy of this reality, then it forces you, if you're even in the least bit curious, it forces you to seek answers. And of course, you're going to seek answers in every known possible way. And you're going to seek them in all the books and all the gurus and all the teachings of the prophets and all these things. And you're never going to find the answer, because all you're going to find is the same old dogma. And it's all incorrect. And the only way to get the truth is vertical. There is no other way, and there has never been another way. Everything up to that point is a stepping stone. So you go to church, you meet with a guru, you learn Sanatana Dharma, you're a Hindu, you're a Muslim, whatever the case may be. You're Baptist, Mormon, whatever. Even an atheist, for crying out loud, will study why there's no such thing as God. They'll study the creation of God and come to the determination that there is no God. Even they will do something. So I'm saying, when you reach into those questions, you're never going to find a valid answer. And that typically causes people to fall away from, or rise out of, or transcend, whatever you want to call it, the path that they're currently on. And that's why they don't want you to do the research. But there's no answers. It takes typically decades of earnest, prayerful humility, seeking the answers from the source of all creation. And when you do find those answers, it will be different than the world. And I think that we're coming closer and closer to the time when the type of things that I'm talking about will be disallowed in the entire world, because we're moving in that direction. Quickly, in fact, very quickly. I mean, you take countries like the North Korea and China and many different countries that have obviously disallowed free thinking because you are being controlled. Just like if you observe reality. A cancer wants to control a physical body, and a physical body wants to get rid of it. There's this constant vying for power. And that's what happens in this reality. And if you follow that path, Jesus said the natural man is an enemy to God, and the natural man is your physical body, your brain, your mind, everything. If you've been on this path and you study Hinduism, for instance, they'll talk about you've been through so many lives to get to where you are today, that you started off as an amoeba, and maybe you were even a planet at one time, and then you morphed into this and that. And when I say morphed, gained further understanding, a kalpa of time gives you multi-billions of years of time to go through the process of becoming algae and pond scum all the way up to a human being. And maybe there's other beings higher than human beings. They talk of angels or whatever. But it is always based upon power. So when you get to the level of a human being where you're self-aware and you can study all these things, what other thing could you possibly conclude? There is no example whatsoever that would indicate that the God that created everything is based entirely upon the foundation of love. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. I mean, yes, you could say, well, look at the rainbow, how beautiful it is, or look at the flowers, how beautiful they are. Therefore, God must be a wonderful God. But then you're ignoring the reality that that damn flower is going to wilt and turn into garbage within a week, and some bug is going to have to eat it to stay alive. There's no evidence whatsoever in this reality. None. No physical evidence at all. And you freaking cannot conclude with an intellectual brain that there is any evidence to indicate that the correct methodology to be like God is to be nothing but pure based love. There's nothing whatsoever to lead you to that conclusion. And this is why the God of this reality, or this planet, Lucifer, is considered evil. Because that particular God has utilized every piece of evidence and sources and magic and everything you can conceive of, and perfected it to the best of his ability as a God to mimic exactly what this reality is. He has made himself into the most powerful, the most perfected intelligence or individual to control literally everything within his power. Within his power. So there are stubborn individuals like myself that have an essence that is invisible. You can't see it. It doesn't exist on this plane of existence. And you have these stubborn spirits, if you will, like me, that are incredibly defiant and absolutely never, ever give in to that line of thinking, even though all the evidence says I'm supposed to be greedy, I'm supposed to be powerful, I'm supposed to lord over. Every evidence there is tells you that that's what you have to do to succeed. And certainly you do in the business world. Look at the politics worldwide. Find me a single politician or a single leader of the world that is, if you find out what's going on behind closed doors, you will find out that they are just incredibly greedy, selfish, and every other conceivable explanation that drives you away from the idea of a loving God. What is evil? Well, there's no way to know what evil is if you don't know the source of all reality. If you don't have that connection to vertical, as I say, if you don't have that, then you don't know the mind of the Creator that created everything, then there's no way to know what evil is. But if you do know that, then you're like a touchstone to be able to test literally everything and say, that's evil, that's not. That's loving, that is not loving. You have that prerogative to do that. And everybody does that, but only one or two or some have that direct link, as Jesus did, vertical. And their judgment is based upon knowing the mind or the will of God to whatever extent is they are capable of, using their intelligence, their wisdom, and their inspiration and intuition as a source from God to know how to judge certain things. And then when you have that conversation with most people of the world, and most especially non-duality and atheists, they will argue with you incessantly because they know without that link, there's no way you can argue your point that there is in fact true evil. That yes, it is indeed true that an asteroid plowing into the earth isn't evil. But if I had the capability with some electromagnetic device that I could anchor it from 1,000,000 miles away and hurl it into another country and kill 100 million people, then that would be evil. Because I am trying to control something. Maybe it's inanimate or whatever it is, but I'm trying to control something to make it do something that is not based upon the love of God. I won't say the will of God, because the will of God is that everything occur exactly as it is occurring. Because if it wasn't occurring exactly the way God intended it to occur, or not intended, allowed it to occur, then that God would not be God. That God would not be a perfect God. That God would be an ignorant God, because the nature of the word ignorant means you don't know. So evil is truly real. But again, there's no way to know this or why it is without having that connection. And you can't get the connection if you aren't it inside you. In other words, this is why Lucifer can't know the mind of God, because Lucifer would have to become like God, loving at the core base. You have to become that to be able to get that connection. But when you do, then you have another situation that people don't understand, and that is the individual, Jesus, was more than happy to take the fall, if you will. Obviously, he did not want to be murdered on a cross with his hands nailed and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, he didn't want that. And if he could have avoided it, I suspect he certainly would, but avoid it at what cost? The evil reality of this realm was opposed to what he taught. And so evil is not only real in a physical sense, but there is a supernatural magic, if you will. I mean, there's a supernatural overlaying ability to manipulate the unseen realm to a certain degree by this God, Lucifer, to cause things to be difficult in your life, for instance. So, not necessarily did the Creator God create this reality and say, well, it's a great idea to put my children in harm's way so that they become better. It will make them better to have cancer and die a miserable death or be raped or some other thing. No. But recognizing the fact that you cannot condemn people to hell, so to say, if they don't actually do things that would qualify going to hell. So when you look at it in a different sense, that in fact you signed up for this. For instance, think about this. Maybe before the foundation of the planet Earth, but certainly before you were born, there was a situation where you could see the maelstrom, the havoc that's taking place on this planet, and you volunteered. You personally volunteered to come here. Or you said, yeah, I want that opportunity to be tested or tried or develop or whatever the reason is for this reality to exist. Yes, I want to do that. I know it's probably going to be hellaciously horrible, but I'm going to step up to the plate and do it. And so now you're here and many people are upset or they want to become atheists or they're just disillusioned by the whole situation. But in fact, they signed up for it. Nobody forced you here. God didn't force you here. That's the interesting thing. A God can force situations to take place, but can't force you personally to make those particular choices. This is something that is not understood by most people in the world, even Christian and Jew and all that stuff. They don't understand that. Because, think about this, I can personally create out of nothing a sphere. I've talked about this before. I can say, okay, visualize in your mind, just as I'm creating it, a sphere. I'm holding it in my hand, and it's approximately a foot in diameter, okay? And then I can say, I'm going to let it float in air. And now it's floating in the air. Now, in my mind, I can visualize it, mainly because I have a brain that can abstractly visualize things. It stays a sphere because I created it as a sphere. It doesn't on its own morph into a square unless I say, sphere, morph into a square. And then if I say that, I can visualize it as a square. But it can't do it on its own accord. And that's the same thing with you. God can create a physical body and a world and a realm and a universe and blah, 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 blah. But he can't make you do what you do. And that's how evil came into existence. Because if he could do it, and if he did do it, then it wouldn't be evil. And in fact, you'd just be a zombie or a robot. There would be absolutely no point for existence. And if the argument went such that, I've heard it taught by many gurus, if the reality went such that he created this as entertainment, well, I would venture to say that this particular God is an idiot, because if I was a God, I certainly wouldn't want to create this reality as entertainment. I can certainly think of a lot more things that are entertaining than this. This is idiotic beyond all imagination. There's no way to imagine a worse reality than this. So, I'm saying these questions, I know the answers to, but I pose them to you because there's no way for you to grow if you don't ask these questions. And more importantly, if you don't get the answers to these questions. You're never going to be able to grow into a spiritually enlightened individual. Not that you have to, but if you want to, that's the path. And I've said before, it is the most difficult task. It is the most difficult challenge imaginable in the world to become spiritually enlightened. Now, when I said that, maybe I left the idea that it's difficult, like working on a job or something like that. I did not mean that in the least degree. What I meant is, if you're on that path and truly that's what you're after, the working part, that's nothing. I'm talking about the unintended or the unforeseen issues that will definitely occur to you to dissuade you from that. Those trials and situations will be so heinous that there's no way to bear it without praying for and receiving some sort of supernatural assistance to help you get through those difficult times that may last decades. They're all designed to push you from that path. They're all designed to get you back to this reality. Breaking free, yeah, the effort on your part, the actual work, yeah, that's something, but everybody does work every single day. That's no big deal. It's the unintended or unforeseen issues that are massive beyond imagination. But worth it beyond imagination if you happen to get there. So, again, those that have any kind of benefit out of this, I love you, and I am grateful that you spend time trying to understand what I'm saying, because there's an eternal friendship there. And it's eternal from my perspective, for sure. And so in that respect, I love you, and I hope you stick to the path and try to focus your attention upon love, and that's the best advice I can give you. Anyways, I hope you appreciate this. I certainly do. And I hope you have a good day. Bye.